The night smelled like burning dreams. Thick, black smoke coiled into the sky, swallowing the stars whole. Flames roared through the Willowbrook animal shelter, their orange tongues licking at the wooden beams, devouring years of love and second chances in minutes. The roof groaned, a dying beast, as embers rained down like hellfire. Lieutenant Daniel Carter's crew had already pulled out the last of the staff. "It's clear," his captain had shouted over the radio. But Daniel hesitated at the perimeter, his boots rooted to the cracked asphalt. Something wasn't right. Then he heard it. A whimper. High-pitched, desperate, alive. It cut through the chaos like a knife. A sound so small, so fragile it shouldn't have survived the inferno's roar. But Daniel heard it, and that was enough. "Damn it," he muttered, tightening his oxygen mask. His captain grabbed his arm. "Carter, don't. The structure's unstable." Daniel shook him off. He'd faced worse in Fallujah. The heat hit him like a wall. Inside, the world was a nightmare of collapsing beams and melting cages. His flashlight beams sliced through the smoke, revealing overturned crates, charred toys, and movement. In the far corner beneath a collapsed bookshelf, a tiny shape trembled. A German Shepherd puppy, no bigger than a football, pinned under debris. His golden fur was streaked with soot, his paws bleeding from frantic scratching. When the pup saw Daniel, his whimpers turned into sharp, broken barks. Save me, please." Daniel didn't think. He moved. Wood cracked overhead. A beam crashed down, missing him by inches. He dropped to his knees, ignoring the searing pain as embers burned through his turnout coat. The puppy's brown eyes locked onto his, wide, trusting, terrified. "Easy, little guy," Daniel rasped, his voice muffled by the mask. He heaved the bookshelf aside. The second the weight lifted, the puppy lunged, not to run but to cling, his tiny body shaking against Daniel's chest. The ceiling groaned again. No time. Daniel tucked the pup inside his coat, shielding him with his arms as he sprinted for the exit. A support beam snapped, fire rained down. Then light. Fresh air hit his lungs like a punch. He stumbled onto the lawn, collapsing onto his knees as his crew surged forward. Someone pulled off his mask. Someone else shouted for a medic. But Daniel only cared about the weight in his arms. He unzipped his coat. The puppy peered up at him, his muzzle smudged with ash, his ears singed at the tips. Alive. Miraculously alive. A paramedic reached for him. "Lieutenant, we need to check your—" Daniel curled over the pup, coughing. "Him first." They wrapped the tiny survivor in a foil blanket. His ribs jutted out under his fur. "Dehydration," the vet said. Third-degree burns on his paws. But when Daniel stroked his head, the puppy licked his soot-stained fingers. A silent thank you. One of the firefighters chuckled. "Looks like you've got a shadow, Carter." Daniel studied the pup. The way he refused to let go of Daniel's sleeve. The way his tail thumped weakly, even in pain. "Yeah," Daniel murmured. He touched his nose to the puppy's. "Kaiser, that's your name. Because every soldier needs a strong one." The nightmares always started the same way. One moment Daniel would be asleep. Then suddenly, he was back in the desert. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled his nose. Sand burned his skin. Distant screams echoed in his ears. His fingers would twitch for a rifle that wasn't there, his body drenched in cold sweat, before he even opened his eyes. But then, warmth. A solid weight pressed against his side. A wet nose nudged his clenched fist. The steady thump, thump, thump of a tail against the mattress. "Kaiser," Daniel would rasp, his voice raw from screaming. The German Shepherd didn't bark, didn't whine, just existed. A living, breathing anchor in the storm. He'd rest his head on Daniel's chest, his deep brown eyes locked onto his human's face, as if to say, I'm here. You're safe. Breathe. Daniel would bury his fingers in Kaiser's fur, counting each inhale until his heartbeat slowed, until the desert faded, until he remembered. This is home. This is now. Kaiser wasn't trained as a service dog, not officially, but somehow he knew. When Daniel's hands began to tremble at crowded grocery stores, Kaiser would lean heavily against his legs, his bulk a grounding force. When fireworks cracked the sky on the 4th of July, Kaiser didn't cower. He climbed into Daniel's lap, 85 pounds of muscle determined to shield him from the noise. And the nightmares. Daniel's therapist called it PTSD. His buddies called it the price of service. But Kaiser? He called it fixable. He developed a routine. Phase 1. Nudge Daniel awake the second his breathing changed. Phase 2. Lick his face until the vacant stare faded. Phase 3. Flop onto his chest like a furry weighted blanket. It worked every damn time. It was a Tuesday. Cloudless. Ordinary. Daniel clipped Kaiser's leash on for their evening walk. The dog pranced in circles, grinning his lopsided German Shepherd grin as they headed toward the crosswalk. Then, a roar. Tires screeching. Kaiser's entire body stiffened a split second before Daniel heard it. The truck was speeding, blazing, through the red light. Daniel froze. Kaiser didn't. With a snarl that sounded more wolf than dog, Kaiser slammed his full weight into Daniel's knees, sending them both crashing onto the sidewalk. The truck's mirror clipped Daniel's shoulder as it barreled past, close enough to feel the rush of air, to smell the burnt rubber. Silence. Then, Jesus Christ! A bystander ran over. That truck didn't even brake. Are you okay? Daniel couldn't answer. His hands shook as he grabbed Kaiser, pulling him close. The dog was panting, his fur standing on end, but his tail wagged weakly against the concrete. You saw that coming, Daniel whispered. His throat tightened. How did you? Kaiser licked his chin, as if to say, Of course I did. I always do. Daniel buried his face in Kaiser's neck, his shoulders shaking. Not from fear, from gratitude so fierce it hurt. You're my guardian angel, boy, he choked out. Kaiser wiggled free just enough to lick the tears off Daniel's face. His tail thumped harder. No need to thank me, that wag seemed to say. Just keep breathing. That's all I need. The alarm shattered the stillness of 3:17 a.m., with the urgency of death itself. Daniel's body moved before his mind fully registered the sound. Years of training propelling him from warm sheets to cold reality in one fluid motion. The scanner's robotic voice repeated the nightmare. Warehouse district. Structural collapse. Civilians trapped. Kaiser was already at his feet, ears pricked forward, body tense with understanding. The dog's nails clicked rapid fire against hardwood as Daniel threw on his gear, each piece of equipment landing with practiced precision. The heavy boots, the Kevlar-lined jacket smelling of smoke and sweat, the helmet that had saved his life 3 times before. Daniel knelt, bringing himself eye-level with his partner. The kitchen light caught the silver creeping into Kaiser's muzzle, the slight clouding of his once sharp eyes. For 6 years, this ritual had never changed. But tonight, Daniel's hands lingered longer on the dog's face, fingers tracing the scar above his left eyebrow from their first fire together. Stay, boy. His voice cracked on the last word. I'll be back. Kaiser's whine cut through the night, a sound so full of knowing it made Daniel's breath catch. The dog's entire body trembled as he forced himself into a perfect sit, muscles coiled tight with the effort of obedience. His tail gave one weak thump against the floor. Daniel hesitated at the door. The moment stretched, fragile as the ice forming on the windshield outside. Then the scanner crackled again, a child's scream in the background, and he was gone. The warehouse was already vomiting flames into the pre-dawn sky when Engine 17 arrived. Daniel could feel the heat through his face shield as he charged toward the collapsed zone, the screams of trapped families guiding him like a beacon. His captain's warning, "It's gonna go, Carter," barely registered as he plunged into the inferno. Inside was chaos made solid. Flames danced along chemical drums. Support beams groaned like dying animals. And through the smoke, the terrified eyes of a little girl, no older than 5, wedged beneath a fallen shelving unit. Daniel's axe made quick work of the debris. He passed the child to his partner just as the world exploded in sound and pain. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the ceiling rushing down, and the sudden, vivid memory of Kaiser's face at the door. The dawn broke gray and heavy over the firehouse where Kaiser had waited for 37 hours straight. He hadn't moved from his post by the door, hadn't touched his food. When Elena arrived, her face already ravaged by grief, the dog simply looked past her, still watching for Daniel. The funeral procession stretched for blocks. Firefighters in dress blues stood at rigid attention as the bagpipes wailed their mournful song. The flag-draped casket gleamed dully under the overcast sky, every fold perfect, every honor bestowed. But Kaiser refused to enter the church. He sat motionless on the stone steps, ears flat against his skull, eyes fixed on the road. The leash slipped from Elena's numb fingers as she joined the others inside. Rain began to fall, mixing with the drool dripping from Kaiser's jaws as he panted in quiet distress. Hours passed. The mourners came and went, each pausing to stroke his head, to murmur empty comforts. Still, Kaiser waited. His body remembered the command, "Stay," even as his soul screamed for his human. As twilight painted the church in shades of violet, a young firefighter approached with Daniel's helmet. Kaiser's nose twitched at the familiar scent before he let out a sound no dog should make, a howl that started deep in his chest and climbed into something almost human in its anguish. The helmet clattered to the ground as Kaiser finally broke. He threw back his head and cried to the darkening sky, a primal, piercing lament that echoed through the empty streets. Somewhere in the distance, a lone ambulance siren answered back. And still, he waited. The first notes of Amazing Grace had just begun to echo through the chapel when Kaiser's ears snapped forward. His nostrils flared, catching a scent on the wind that made his entire body tense. The mourners' voices rose in harmony, but all Kaiser heard was the pounding of his own blood, a primal drumbeat urging him to move. Then he was running. Not away, never away from Daniel, but toward something only he understood. Kaiser's paws tore at the damp earth as he vaulted over flower arrangements and between gravestones. The cemetery blurred around him, marble angels weeping, dates carved in stone, fresh dirt piled high where other loved ones slept. But Kaiser didn't pause. His nose led him like a compass, following a trail only he could smell. The sharp tang of diesel from the firehouse parking lot. The metallic bite of sweat on well-worn leather. The faintest whisper of Daniel's scent, clinging to fabric like a ghost. A groundskeeper shouted as the 90-pound shepherd barreled past, but Kaiser didn't slow. The world had narrowed to one imperative: find, protect, remember. The fire station's storage yard was locked, but Kaiser didn't need keys. He scrabbled at the chain-link fence until his claws found purchase, hauling himself over with a grunt. His back legs kicked wildly as he tumbled into the yard, landing hard on a pile of discarded turnout gear. And there it was, Daniel's old training helmet, tossed in a bin of retired equipment. The very one he'd worn the day they met, its surface still scarred by the shelter fire that had brought them together. Kaiser's teeth closed around the strap. He pulled, shaking his head like he used to with his favorite rope toy. But this was no game. Soil packed under his nails as he dug at the frozen ground beneath the helmet bin, his paws leaving smears of red in the dirt. When the strap finally tore free, Kaiser staggered back, panting. Blood dripped from his torn pads. He didn't care. The far edge of the cemetery was wilder than the manicured gardens near the chapel. Here, the grass grew tall and uneven, dotted with simple markers worn smooth by time. Kaiser wove through them with single-minded purpose, the helmet swinging heavily from his jaws. Then, the oak tree. Ancient and gnarled, its roots cradled a small, unmarked plot. The earth here was disturbed, as if someone had recently visited. Kaiser dropped the helmet gently atop the loose soil, and then he howled. It wasn't the sound of a domesticated dog. This was the cry of a wolf mourning its pack, a raw, shuddering wail that climbed into the twilight and split it open. Inside the chapel, heads turned. Elena dropped her hymnal, because somehow, impossibly, Kaiser had found Rex's grave. Daniel's first canine partner, buried here years before Kaiser was even born. A dog he'd never met, but whose presence lingered in every calloused spot on Daniel's hands, in the stories he'd told during thunderstorms, in the way he'd sometimes stare at old photos before ruffling Kaiser's fur. Now, the two guardians were united at last. Kaiser circled the spot 3 times before lying down, his body curled around the helmet. His muzzle rested on the freshly turned earth, nose pressed to the ground as if listening for something far below. The wind carried his howl through the cemetery, weaving between headstones like a living thing. Somewhere overhead, a lone hawk answered, and for the first time since Daniel left, Kaiser closed his eyes and waited. The howl stopped Elena mid-step. It wasn't the sound itself that froze her. God knew she'd heard Kaiser whine, bark, even yelp when he stepped on a thorn. But this was something else. A sound that didn't belong to this world. A sound that scraped against the sky and left it bleeding. She turned away from the chapel, her black heels sinking into damp grass as she followed the echoes. Kaiser's paw prints cut through the cemetery like a map of grief. Deep gouges near the fence where he'd leapt over. Smears of blood leading to the fire station, his nails torn raw from digging. A single muddy dog tag, Daniel's old helmet strap, caught on a rose bush. Elena's breath hitched. 6 years of marriage had taught her this. Dogs don't mourn like humans. They don't need caskets or hymns. They need proof, something solid to remind them their person was real. She broke into a run. The old oak stood at the far edge of the property, its branches stretching over a forgotten corner where the grass grew wild. Beneath it, Kaiser lay curled in a tight circle, his body wrapped around, oh God, a grave. Not the fresh one they dug for Daniel. This one was older, its marker weathered smooth by years of rain. But the earth atop it had been disturbed, clawed open with such desperation that clumps of soil and roots lay scattered around Kaiser like offerings. And there, placed carefully at the head of the grave, Daniel's helmet. Elena's hands flew to her mouth. She knew this plot, knew it better than she'd ever admitted. Kaiser didn't lift his head as she approached. His muzzle rested on the upturned soil, his breath stirring the small, sun-bleached bones peeking through the dirt. Bones no human had touched in nearly a decade. Rex, Daniel's first canine partner. The dog who'd saved his life in Iraq before an IED took his own. The reason Daniel had volunteered at the shelter where he'd found Kaiser. Elena sank to her knees. The pieces crashed together. Kaiser had never been to this grave. Daniel had stopped visiting years ago, unable to bear the memories. No living person had led him here. The fire station was blocks away, the helmet buried under piles of gear. Yet somehow he'd known. Her fingers brushed a curved bone, a rib maybe, and the truth hit her like a fist. He didn't just smell Daniel on the helmet, he smelled Rex. The same scent that had lingered on Daniel's old uniforms, in the shadowy corners of his nightmares, on the days he'd stare at a photo album without speaking. Kaiser had dug up the only other soul who'd loved Daniel as fiercely as he had. Rain began to fall, mixing with the dirt on Kaiser's fur as he finally looked up. His eyes held no apology, only a quiet certainty. Elena understood now. This wasn't refusal to mourn. This was a vigil, one guardian welcoming another. A silent passing of the torch from the dog who'd kept Daniel alive in the desert to the one who'd kept him alive at home. She reached for Kaiser, her fingers threading through his matted fur. Together they knelt in the mud as the storm rolled in, two hearts aching for the same irreplaceable man. Above them, the oak branches swayed, a living memorial to the bond no grave could ever hold. The seasons turned around Kaiser like pages in a story no one else could read. Summer baked the cemetery grass to brittle gold, but the old oak's shadow kept his vigil cool. Autumn came with a carpet of rust-colored leaves that he slept beneath like a royal cloak. Winter tried to drive him away with snow that crusted his eyebrows white, but he simply dug deeper into Rex's grave, his body heat melting the frost from the bones beneath him. Elena came every Sunday. At first, she tried to coax through the cemetery, offering weaving between headstones like a living thing. Even Daniel's old sweatshirt, somewhere overhead, but Kaiser would only take the food, answered, nudge her hand in thanks, and for the first time since Daniel left his post, Kaiser closed his eyes. She stopped trying. The howl stopped Elena mid-step, a weatherproof bed. It wasn't the sound itself that froze her. God fresh water bowls Kaiser that the groundskeeper refilled daily, even yelp when he stepped Daniel's on a thorn. Old fireman's coat, but this, which she draped over Kaiser like a blanket during storms, a sound that didn't belong to this world. The cemetery staff adopted him quietly, a sound that scraped against the sky and left bits of sausage by the gate. She turned away from the chapel. Teenage visitors sinking into damp grass as she followed the echoes, but spoke in whispers when they saw his cloudy eyes still watching like a map of grief. Kaiser's muzzle gouges near the fence where he'd leapt over. His hips stiffened until rising blood leading to the fire station. But still, his nails torn raw from digging, chasing off a single muddy dog strayed too close to Daniel's old helmet strap, even when his sprint caught on a rose bush. Elena's strangers who lingered near Daniel's headstone of marriage had taught her his voice now cracked with age. Dogs don't mourn like humans. Licking the weather-worn helmet every morning as if checking in. They need proof. Then came the day he couldn't to remind them their person was Elena real. Found him panting shallowly. She broke into a run, his ribs heaving against Rex's far edge of the property. The vet said it was time. Stretching over his heart was corner where the grass grew shutting down. Beneath when they lifted Kaiser him into the car, curled in a tight Kaiser circle. Let out a sound his so wretched that Elena immediately ordered, "Oh God, turn around, a grave." They carried him not back the fresh on a stretcher. One they dug for Daniel. Kaiser's breathing this one was older the moment they placed him between the two graves by years of rain. His tail thumped weakly but when Elena arranged Daniel's coat beneath his head, open with such desperation. As the vet prepared the injection, clumps of soil Kaiser and turned his face toward the freshly turned earth where Daniel lay. And there, his ears placed carefully as if hearing a voice only he could Daniel's discern. Helmet. Elena's hand she saw his tail wag one last time when the needle went in. Knew it better than she'd ever Kaiser that evening. Kaiser did him lift his head as she approached his two beloveds. His muzzle rested on the upturned soil, carved from the same marble as Daniel's, small, sun-bleached bones loyal beyond through the dirt. Stay, bones boy. No human had touched in nearly a decade. Groundskeeper Hendricks later told reporters about the canine partner. On certain nights, the dog who'd saved his life in Iraq through the cemetery, an IED took his own. It doesn't sound like wind at all. The reason Daniel had volunteered at the shelter where he found Kaiser. 1. Elena sank to her knees. The steady hum of a veteran's crashed together. 2. Kaiser had never been to this working dog on alert. 3. Daniel had stopped visiting years ago. The soft whine of a puppy who finally found his way home. No living leave dog toys now. The firefighters rubbed the helmet engraving on Kaiser's stone buried under piles of gear. And every anniversary, yet somehow Elena places 3 biscuits in a row. Her fingers brushed a curved one for each soul who taught her what love really means. And the truth hit her like a fist. The grass grows tallest over their graves. He didn't just smell Daniel on the helmet. Green, he smelled alive. Together. The same scent that